Hello! This morning would have been a fantastic video with the mist at when it's passed, but I didn't take a microphone, so James's lack of preparation strikes again. Never mind, it doesn't really matter, because what I thought I'd do today is an editing video, because last week I suggested that I could do an editing video, and overwhelmingly you said you thought that would be a good idea. Some of you stressed that you were a bit concerned that there were too many Lightroom focused editing videos around. What I would suggest, I am going to go through Lightroom bits and bobs, but what I would suggest is that when you watch an editing video, when you watch an editing video, regardless of what program is used, by and large, it'll be focusing on similar things to what you could do in another editing program. Because as far as I'm aware, pretty much every editing program allows you to make changes to shadows, highlights, blacks, whites, contrast, sharpness, all that kind of stuff. And that really is going to be the kind of stuff that I'm talking about today. So don't shy away from the fact that just because this is a Lightroom focused to an extent tutorial, it doesn't mean you can't take anything from it just because you don't use Lightroom. That'd be the first thing I'd say. The second thing I would say is that you might remember if you watched last week's video that I was shooting entirely JPEGs, and some people suggested, well, that's a silly idea. If you're going to shoot JPEG, you should shoot JPEG plus RAW, and that's exactly what I did. Also, as you might be able to see on the camera, I am shooting JPEG, but I'm also shooting RAW, just in case out of nowhere I get like the photo of my life and I'm completely gutted that I haven't got a RAW file of it. I know it's unlikely, particularly on a day like today, but you never know. And I thought I could use that to demonstrate some of the differences between the two when editing today. That was an extremely long-winded way of saying, let me show you some JPEGs and RAWs next to each other and how I edit them differently. Very quickly, if you don't know the difference between JPEGs and RAWs, the best way I can think to explain it, as I did about 3 years ago on this channel, is to talk about steak. Imagine you've got a raw steak. It's completely unprocessed, uncooked, in fact, and you can do pretty much anything with that. Not anything, but you can cook lots of different ways with that uncooked steak. Now, imagine a JPEG, in other words, a cooked steak, like a well-done steak. There's a very limited number of things you can do with that because you can't uncook it. And that is what a JPEG is. Basically, it's a processed file, and lots of the data and therefore opportunity has been thrown away in order to process and compress that file. So a JPEG typically is a lot less useful than a RAW, which immediately begs the question, why on earth would you ever want to shoot JPEG over RAW then? Well, rarely, to be honest. I hardly ever do shoot JPEG, but there are lots of people who want to, because a JPEG as a compressed file typically looks a bit nicer straight out the box than a RAW file does. I say out the box, I mean out the camera. And so yeah, if you don't want to spend loads of time on editing, then typically JPEGs are a good way to go because they look pretty good as soon as they come out of the camera. Camera manufacturers spend an ungodly amount of time, energy and money on trying to make their JPEGs look good, despite the fact that most photographers, most serious photographers, rarely use them. But yeah, if you don't want to do much editing, JPEGs are a good way to go. Let's look at some of the differences then between a JPEG and a RAW when you do edit. Finally. Right, so here what we've got is a JPEG and a RAW side by side. The RAW is on the left as the reference file and the JPEG is on the right as the active file. Now looking at them from afar, or indeed perhaps through YouTube's horrible compression, you might not actually be able to see much of a difference between them. In fact, even on this 5K monitor, I can't see a whole lot of difference between them. If I look a bit closer, I can see a slight difference in color, a slight difference in contrast, and a slight difference in sharpness, because after all, the JPEG has been processed, and therefore those things have been tweaked through that processing process. Now, in my experience, a lot of people won't even touch JPEGs for fear of the fact that they don't think they're any good at all. I would disagree with that. For example, let me just show you that if I bump down the highlights and I boost up the shadows, that looks like a completely usable file still to me. Now, if I swap these images around and I make the same changes to the RAW file, you end up with pretty much exactly the same result, apart from the contrast, the sharpness, and the colors, as I mentioned before. Now, to be honest, that is quite impressive. And even though not all JPEGs are born exactly the same, if you've got a 10-year-old phone that's shooting JPEGs, it's not going to be able to do this in the same way. But I think in a lot of instances, photographers don't give JPEGs any time of day whatsoever. But actually, in some instances, they hold up to RAWs much better than I think most people would imagine. Now, where they can fall down a little bit is when you start to mess around with temperature. So if I move the temperature down on this RAW, and then I swap the images around and do basically the same thing on the JPEG, there's just not as much flexibility when it comes to changing the white balance. Now, to be honest, I'd never have to change the white balance this drastically ever, because I pretty much always shoot auto white balance on my cameras, and I'd say 99% of the time the camera gets it right, or broadly right, and I'll have to make tiny tweaks, and the other 1% I might have to make a slightly bigger tweak. But by and large, I never have to make huge tweaks, and therefore, well, the JPEG wouldn't be the problem in that regard either. It's not all sunshine and rainbows though, as far as the JPEG is concerned, which I shall now demonstrate with one of the other images I got that day. Right, so here is a photo that I got about half an hour after the first one, and a few people in the comments mentioned that they thought maybe the sheep were trying to fix the tractor. Made me chuckle. Anyway, again, at first glance, there's not a huge amount of difference between these files. There's a bit more colour, a bit more green in the JPEG, which is to be expected because, again, it's processed. The colour has been tweaked in camera. Aside from that, when you first look at the files, though, there's not a huge amount between them. However, if you look a bit closer, and these are edited files, edited with one of my presets, which I'll talk about in a minute, but this JPEG looks disgusting when you get to the sky. There's banding everywhere, and there's just not the detail to make a compelling looking sky and to capture all the tones and the colours accurately. If you compare this to the RAW, you can see on the RAW that there's really smooth graduations between the clouds, and there's none of this banding that you get with the JPEG. That's the problem with JPEGs. If you have a scene of really high dynamic range, it's unlikely that the camera is going to be able to capture all that. I mean, the camera does capture it, but it throws a lot of that data away when it processes the JPEG. And then when you start pushing the sliders in post-production, the file just isn't flexible enough to be able to keep up with it. Now, this isn't always a problem. If I show you another couple of images that I took again on that day, here we are again. JPEG on the right is the active file, RAW on the left, both of them edited. There isn't really much of a problem in this sky, just because the exposure was different. The camera might have metered differently, and I'm not putting as big a strain on the file in order to bring the details in the clouds out. So yeah, if the camera meters as you want it to, or you set the exposure correctly, you do sometimes get away with this with JPEGs. You just need to be a lot more careful. When it comes to editing, I mean, with a RAW, it's basically like wrestling with a lion. You can be quite aggressive with it. And I've never wrestled a lion, but I imagine you can sort of be quite rough. And I mean, it'd be like WWE type wrestling, like scripted. I'm under no illusions that if it wasn't scripted, the lion would tear me up immediately. And the JPEG was like wrestling a mouse. You need to be very careful, even if it's scripted. Very, very careful. Perhaps my worst analogy yet. I'm sure you'll agree. So yeah, when it comes to editing JPEGs, it's perfectly possible to push the files around a bit. You just need to be a little bit careful and pay attention, particularly to the highlights and the shadows, to make sure that you've not got any horrible artifact or banding or anything like that, because it can happen. Where's my wedding ring? Now, with regard to editing these files with presets, or my presets in particular, which I mentioned was a question I get frequently last week, yes, it's possible. This preset that I used is a variation of the burnt cinnamon preset, which is available in my free presets pack on my website. I'm imagining you can guess the difference between burnt cinnamon and burnt green and what I've changed in order to get this new preset. But yeah, essentially I've thrown that on all of the JPEGs, and well, I've toned it down a bit using the fader plugin, which I would really recommend if you're into using presets on Lightroom, particularly if you want to use those presets with JPEGs, because often, as I said, JPEGs have been processed, and therefore sometimes they're already quite contrasty, they're already sharp, and the colors have already been played with. And so if you design a preset that's been made for RAW images and then you apply it to JPEG images, then it'll probably look really, really strong. And using the fader means that you can just dial that whole preset back without having to make the change to every single slider and tool in Lightroom. So yeah, using presets for JPEGs is perfectly possible, even if, like my presets, they're a bit on the strong side. And the reason mine are on the strong side is well, it's simply because I can use that fader tool to dial them back wherever I need to. So last week, as I said, I was shooting JPEGs, but I was also, as you might remember, trying to get a collection of like a dozen images, 10 images, something like that, to pull together into a story. And you can see that story on my website at /bike story, I think it was. But whenever you do that, one of the most important things you can do when it comes to editing those files is editing them consistently so they all look the same in terms of color and tone. So if you're into using presets, it's probably a good idea to use the same preset across all of those different images. Definitely one of the most important parts of trying to make a story look like a story, to try and make those images look like they're in a complete set and they belong together. Now I did plan to go through this particular preset and show what the sliders are doing and what the tone curve's doing and stuff, but actually I think it'd be more interesting to assess one with an image a couple of weeks ago that I shot in Blue Hour. You might remember that as well. So let's do that. Right, so here we are. You'll recognize this image or one of these images if you watched the video from a couple of weeks ago when I went up a hill close to my house to try and get a Blue Hour photo that worked quite well. The story, if you don't know, basically is I wanted to try and make myself and my bike look lost. And I achieved that, I think, by making sure that I was looking at the bridle way sign and my phone at the same time to try and look for directions. At least that's what I wanted it to look like. And I wanted to get it in Blue Hour because that adds a bit of drama. It adds a bit of, it adds a bit of time consciousness to the scene, I guess, because obviously you wouldn't want to be lost in the dark in any circumstances. Anyway, I wasn't lost. It was all a big lie, but I think this photo does quite a good job of showing that I might have been lost. Now, a number of comments on that video suggested that they were a bit upset that I'd hidden the horizon behind the fence, as you can see on the image on the right here. Now, there are a couple of ways around this that I tried, but I found that the background in the images that I got where I hadn't hidden the horizon were just a bit more messy and were a bit distracting compared to the one where I didn't include the horizon. To be honest, if I'd messed around a bit more, I probably could have put the horizon between the two fence slats, but it was going dark very quickly and, well, I just wanted to get the shot. Anyway, so that's why I picked that one. If we come out of reference view though, to just show you the final image that I chose to go with, and if I reset all of the changes, this was the raw file that came out of my camera. And as you can see, I made a few tweaks to get to the end final result. So for this image, I used a variation of my high key punch free preset called High Key Punch Colder. Again, no prizes for guessing what's different about this one. So if I just apply that, ta-da, and immediately I think it looks a little bit more interesting. Still not good by any stretch though. So I would suggest I need to up the exposure quite considerably, to be honest. Okay, something like that. Now, as you can see, again, I've stuck the highlights down as far as they'll go in Lightroom, and I've upped the shadows too. Now, if I don't do that, you'll see that the photo just doesn't look that engaging. There's too much contrast, and therefore your eyes kind of get pulled to the sky, and there's not a lot of interest in the bottom half of the photo because it's all completely underexposed and just looks a bit messy. But by bringing up the shadows and moving down the highlights, you kind of flatten the whole image and make a lot of it much more appealing, at least I think. From here, I still think there are a few tweaks worth making. You can see there's a bit of rubbish behind me that I didn't see, so I'm just going to clone that out. I can do that in Lightroom fairly confidently without having to go into Photoshop. I still think my face needs to be a little bit brighter, but I don't want to go any lighter with the exposure of the whole image for fear of kind of blowing it all out. So I'm going to make a local adjustment with the brush to my face. Just paint over my face. I don't have to be too exact with this because I've got the auto mask turned on. And I'm just going to go up a little bit with the exposure, but keep control of the highlights and turn down the saturation a touch. That looks a little bit better. I want to do a similar thing with this signpost, which is basically the other subject in this image. Excellent mouse control. So I'm going to up the exposure just a little bit and the whites because I want to bring out the white text at the top of this sign because I think that really shows to the viewer that I'm looking at a sign, not just a post stuck in the ground. And it's quite an interesting weathered post, so I might just up the sharpness a touch. I think if I up the texture, it'll just look a bit too much, so I'm going to go for sharpness instead. Now, what makes this photo work is that I exposed for the lights. Because if I'd underexposed this too much and the lights weren't powerful enough to light up the foreground or my face, then, I mean, it just would have looked horrible. And having to do loads of work in post on this grass in the foreground would have been an absolute nightmare. Basically, I find as a rule of thumb when it comes to editing photos, if you have to spend more than 5 or certainly 10 minutes editing the photo, probably isn't that good in the first place. And it should make you reconsider whether you're wasting your time or not. In my experience, I find. That doesn't really go for if you're a complete beginner and you're not really too sure what you're doing, because all of that time experimenting is worthwhile. But if you're an experienced photographer and you're spending more than 10 minutes on one photo, in my experience, that might be a sign that the photo isn't all that compelling. Rain's coming down. I've had some cracking storms the last couple of days. Anyway, last couple of things. This foreground grass here I find a bit distracting. So I'm going to take the gradient and I'm going to take down the exposure just of this grass in the foreground so that your eyes don't get too distracted by it and they get led towards the subject. I think that helps a little bit. And I'm actually pretty happy with the flare from the front bike light in this shot. However, you can, if you wanted to, in Photoshop, make it a little bit better. So let's do that. Right, here's the image in Photoshop. I think I've showed this technique in another video before. I can't really remember. So new layer, I'm then going to go to Edit, Fill, and I'm going to fill that layer with black. Then I'm going to go from normal down here, and I'm going to go to Screen. Then I'm going to go to Filter, Render, I think it was Render. Render, Lens Flare. And my favourite is the 105 Prime. And I'm going to click OK. And then you'll see we'll be presented with a lens flare that is on its own layer. It's on this black layer, which we've set to screen. If we set that back to normal, you just get black behind it. But by screen, you get rid of all the black, basically. And from here, you can make some adjustments to make sure that it's the right size and stuff. I mean, that is way too strong, and I'd have to do quite a bit of masking. And to be honest, I'd need to go down to the FX, blending options, and then hit Option to split up this arrow, and I'd maybe need to have a play around with this. But I say maybe, definitely would need to have a play around with this. That is still way too strong, but yeah, you get the idea. You can add a lens flare in Photoshop, essentially. But that, in a nutshell, is how I edited this photo. I must have had this open before because that piece of rubbish is open again, and the foreground's not dark. Never mind, I think you get what I mean. So yeah, there's some quite random thoughts on editing, to be honest, and hopefully that was in some way useful. This video today has been sponsored by nobody. So myself, I guess. My books, the 2018 book, I think, is there's like a couple left, maybe, literally 2 or 3 left. So they're sold out nearly, to be honest, which is a shame, but I've still got plenty of the 2019 one. So thank you so much to everyone who's bought one. Hope you're enjoying it. At the moment, I'm not too sure what the 2020 one is going to look like, because the 2019 one was images from literally all over the world, whereas it's not looking like I'm going to be able to do that in 2020. So it's going to be a more UK focused one. To be honest, it's going to be much more focused around the 5-mile radius of my house at this rate. But can't complain. As you've seen, I've got to go out on my bike quite a bit, so that's good. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next week, and like I said, hopefully that was useful.